the end that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know about y'all. I didn't like any really of the names that Keith came up with. So I'm going to call us the Trace Amigos. And we'll just get going. I'll introduce myself. So welcome to Trace Amigos. My name's Matt Fomer. Spent 10 years in the coaching world. Got to spend 6 of those coaching with Mark at Carthage, and got to be a part of a state championship team and learn that state championship culture down there. And I've carried a lot of that throughout my life, what I've learned from those years. But spent 10 years in the coaching world, spent 2 years in the principal world, and then opened up my Rollo Insurance Agency office here in Hallsville back in 2020. And just enjoy being a part of the community and the flexibility of my schedule to serve the community. I'm on the school board here in Hallsville, and that's what I love about Rollo and what they allow us to do. So if y'all want to introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Mark Brown. I spent 27 years in the football and coaching industry. I spent 20 of those at the public high school level after my years at the University of North Texas, and got to be a part of 5 state championship teams. Lost a state championship when I was at Marshall, but won 5 of those at Carthage. Just loved coaching, enjoyed it, but it was time to do something different. And so I had to find another great team to be a part of, and was able to open an insurance agency here in Carthage, Texas, with Rollo. Just an outstanding organization, fit the culture and mindset that I've had in coaching, and that's that God, family, country mindset, and wanting to be the best at what we do. And so I love that. Love to give back to my community. Have many former players as my clients. I love that, getting to teach them a little bit about insurance now. But football was always my first love. Spent, like I said, a lot of time in it, and love it. And grew up. I wasn't an Aggie, obviously, but my rest of my family pretty much was. So I spent my high school days going down to College Station back in the Jackie Sherrill days, and watching the Wrecking Crew and Bucky Richardson. Went to 6 Cotton Bowls. So I've been an Aggie for a long time, just kind of an outside Aggie. So
speaking of Jackie Sherrill, our superintendent, John Martin, was recruited and played for Jackie Sherrill down there during those years. So I walked down the hallway the other day and saw his picture up there, and thought, man, I bet that was a heck of a time to be on that team and in that group. So
for sure. My name's Seth Drennan. I was a high school coach for 16 years before joining Rollo, due to kind of needed to be around the family more. The coaching schedule, as y'all all know, is a grind. And now I grind, but it's just at my own time, my own hours, versus the rigid schedule that coaching. Like Mark said, my first love was football. That's what kept me in coaching for many, many years, longer than I'd really planned to be once I got into it. It's something about those Friday nights and everything, and then the camaraderie in the coach's office and the field house and the cultures, the coaching staffs I worked for. That's what kept me in it longer too. So that's why I'm grateful for finding Rollo, because the culture and the people are what I find myself, what I value. Who I'm around is what I value just as much as anything. I grew up a Longhorn fan. I hate to admit that, but we were T-shirt Longhorns. We did not go to school there. And then when I got of adult age, about 14 or 15, I went on some FFA judging trips, and I visited A&M and many other campuses. Never went to Austin for those, but I went for other things. And when I went on campus as a teenager, a young teen, there was no question which place I wanted to go, and converted my whole family maroon. I was the first generation Aggie, and now my little brother went there. My nephew went there, who is also like a little brother. Whole family's maroon now, and my dad too. And we timed it really bad because I was a Longhorn fan in the 90s, right? Which was a really good time for A&M. And then I switched. I was an A&M fan starting around 2000. And so I was in college and got to watch Texas win the national championship with me. I got to see Vince Young play on Kyle Field. So as a student. So anyway, yeah, timed it pretty poorly, but love ball, love talking ball, and looking forward to this.
Well, let's hope that maybe we're doing this at the right time with the Elko era starting. So we're going to talk about season predictions, and we talked about the opponents. So at home, A&M's going to play, obviously, Notre Dame this weekend, then McNeese State. They've got Bowling Green at home, Missouri at home, LSU at home, New Mexico State at home, and then, of course, the T-SIPs at home at the end of the year. Their road games are Florida, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Auburn, and then, of course, I'm not sure. I think this is the last year, the neutral site game with Arkansas at Cowboy Stadium. So, in saying all that, my prediction for the year is going to be 9-3 on the year. I think that we are going to lose 2 games at home. I think the 3 games that will come up that are coin flips are going to be the ones that probably could fall into that L category, depending on how the year goes. Obviously, this weekend's going to be tough against Notre Dame. LSU's always tough, and Texas, obviously, being at the end of the year. And then I think the one road loss is going to be Auburn. I hate to say it because I can't stand Hugh Freeze, but the guy seems to be able to win, wherever he goes, ethically or non-ethically, I'm not sure, but he tends to win. So, Mark, what's your thoughts on the season?
I hate predictions. First of all, let's get that out of the way.
Hey, Nick Saban gets paid to do them nowadays too.
Yeah,
so.
and he doesn't like it, and he doesn't like it any more than I do because you spend enough time in this business and seeing people who majored in journalism try to predict games or,
Well, that's the difference. You've coached.
Yeah, I know, but I also understand I haven't been at any of the practices, and we don't know, especially this year with Elko being it's a whole new thing at A&M. Elko's been here before, but this is completely different. So it's really hard to say. I think this is if you do the journalistic viewpoint, it is a 9-3 look. I do believe we're going to beat Notre Dame on Saturday. I think it works in our favor. Notre Dame's supposed to win. They got to come down here in Texas and deal with this August heat, and they're not used to that. I think the Ags are the culture, the atmosphere. I think the players are excited from everything I see, and I think with Elko's defense, and I've said this for many years. Notre Dame comes into every season a lot like that Orange team from that big community college in Austin. They come in overrated all the time just because, they won a bunch of games in the 40s. So they have a lot of money and prestige. So I don't see the Echoes being waked up this week at Kyle Field. So I think they'll beat Notre Dame. I think the road games, at Florida, that's a tough one. You never know about Florida. They have the potential to be really good. The Auburn road game or the Auburn game, that's definitely a tough one. If you look at the schedule, if I said what 3 games is A&M for sure going to win, I look at McNeese, New Mexico State, and Texas because I don't see A&M losing to Texas this year. I don't care what the records are going into that game. I think A&M will beat Texas. The Ags have wanted this for a long time. Texas has avoided it in my mind because they didn't feel like it was a win-win situation, and I think A&M's going to beat Texas no matter what. I don't care if Texas comes in undefeated. I think the Ags take them down.
I hope you're right.
I think it's going to be a good year. It's the SEC, and it's hard, and you never know how it's going to go. But I feel confident if they stay healthy, they're going to be in the mix at the end.
All right, Seth, what are you thinking for the year?
All right, I had originally in my notes I had 9-3, and I was going to go that way, but I think I'm going to go ahead and say 10-2. And the reason I said that is this morning I ran across 2 things or a stat, a very interesting stat out there about basically if you take the composite talent rating that the recruiting sites put together, and you say if a coach coaches a team and plays a team that's rated higher than him and beats them, that's a +1. If you lose to a team that's rated lower than you, that's a -1. And if you beat a team rated lower than you, that's a 0. Previous staff on that using that matrix was at -9, and Elko's staff was at +6 in his 2 years at Duke. So you're talking about a situation where in this, so I looked it up. When I saw that stat, I went and looked it up. And if you look at our schedule, there's only one team with a higher composite rated talent than us. So I'll give Elko some grace too, and say we're not going to win every one of those games, but so I settled on 10-2. If you go by that matrix, if we end the season and Elko has a 0 effect, that's an 11-1 season. So that's a little hard to do right now, but I'm going to go 10-2.
Yeah. So Seth, that's why me and you get along so well. That's why we're going to do the offense breakdown together, because you're always on the positive side. I love it, man. I love it. So next we're going to talk season MVP predictions. Mark loves predictions, so we're going to stay on that topic. And so, Mark, give us your defensive MVP for the season.
Man, that's so hard to do. Here's the thing. I think the defensive MVP, whether the sports writers and all those people, they like those little skinny dudes. But I've coached every position on defense, but D-line was the one that I probably did the most and one that I liked the most. And, I think that the MVP on the defense will come from the D-line. So if I had to pick one, I'm going to go with Shamar Turner. I think that any 4-3 defense is going to everything. If you go back to Monty Kiffin's Tampa 2, everything hinges off the play of the 3 technique. If that guy can demand a double team on every snap, then that opens up a lot for a guy that attacks the defense. And Elko is a guy that likes to attack with the nickel package. He's got a guy he calls the jack, and he does that so he can get multiple looks and really attack offenses. And so there's going to be plays where that dude's double teamed and it opens other things up because they have to double team him. And I think he's that guy. And I think that to me, Elko's philosophy on defense, I love a lot better than what we've seen in the last couple of years. And
you don't like dropping your 6'5" DN into coverage?
I don't mind doing that. I've done that. I've won state championships doing that, but there's a way to do that and there's a way not to do it. We never did it in straight coverage unless it was 3rd and long. We usually did that to give some kind of zone pressure where we bring 2 and move everybody up front to really put pressure on, some slide protections or some turn protections. So, but the key to me is if that guy can demand a double team, that opens up a lot of stuff for the run game defense and a lot for the blitz package stuff that they will do. They can really confuse some O-lines. I think that's where they're going to have the advantage against Notre Dame. Their offensive line is going to be young, and if Elko has a lot of that stuff in, and there's a guy in the middle there that they have to really be conscientious about making sure he gets blocked. He may not have the most tackles, he may not have the most sacks, but if a coach watches it on film, he's going to know what's really going on. And so that's my MVP if I had to pick one.
Well, I hope you're right, because that kid's come back for another year. He could have went to the NFL or transferred with some of the other guys. And so for his sake, I hope he does. I hope he is the defensive MVP and his NFL draft stock goes through the roof and he gets rewarded for being loyal and coming back. So, Seth, what's your offensive MVP?
Well, I'm going to go with the obvious choice, but I'm going to give you some reasons why. Connor Wigman, because – we haven't had a quarterback that started the year, finished the year since Kellen Mond. That feels like an eternity ago in Aggie football time. But the impact, who is going to determine Connor Wigman as the offensive MVP is actually not a player. It's Adam Cushing, the offensive line coach that Elko and Klein brought on board from Duke. He's done a great job. He's been productive at every stop. And if he can make our offensive line become a net positive on the team, and Wigman plays every game this year, I think he's an offensive MVP, and I think he's going to be an SEC player, like all SEC, potential All-American type player, if he can take the snaps in all, hopefully 14 or 15 games. We'll see.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with you there. I think, Jimbo took a lot of heat, and there's a lot of it that was rightly directed at him. But we've all coached, and you got to think they recruited quarterbacks. So they got 3 or 4 that are supposed to be studs. We were high school coaches. If our number 1 quarterback went down, we knew how the rest of that season was going to go. God bless every other kid on there. But if you don't have a guy in that spot, you're in bad shape. So, and
not to delve too far into the past, but that was an issue with Jimbo at the end of his Florida State run too. And at some point you can say unlucky but at some point you say there may be a system flaw here as well.
Hey, I'll tell you this, going back to me and Mark's days at Carthage, Scott Surratt, in my opinion, go down is the greatest high school football coach in the state of Texas. And every year he would have talks with us about, hey, you want to, if you want to be a coordinator, head coach, whatever, I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. And I remember one time I was talking about going to be an offense coordinator at another school. And he said, do you have your offensive line coach lined up? And I said, no. And he said, you do not take an offense coordinator job without the O-line coach. And so like I think Mark said earlier, everybody likes the skill guys, the skinny guys. But if those wide rear ends don't block for you up front, you're in a bad shape. So, I agree with you 100% on that one. So I'm going to pick the newcomer of the year. It could be a freshman. It could be a transfer. This one to me is pretty stinking easy, especially if you watch the spring game. But Nick Scorton from Purdue, that dude is, Elko needs to be thanking the good Lord above that dude picked up the phone when he called, because a kid that graduates from Bryan High School that somehow we let get out of Texas, and we're able to convince him to come back home and play in front of his family and play at A&M. So excited to see what that guy does this year. So at this time, we're going to move on and kind of talk about A&M's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. Notre Dame had a very, very good defense last year. They're probably going to have a very, very good defense this year. Last year, they were eighth overall scoring defense and fifth in yards allowed per game. They got 2 All-Americans that they're returning at Howard Cross, who's a D lineman, and then Benjamin Morrison, who's a cornerback. And then they got a safety that was Defensive Player of the Year last year. I don't know how he wasn't an All-American, but he was Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he had 7 picks alone. I looked it up. Last year, A&M as a team had 10 picks, so he had 7 by himself. The whole A&M team had 10, so they're going to base out of a 4-3. They're going to be hard to run on. They averaged only giving up about 120 yards a game on the ground last year at Duke with Cushing. They ran the ball hard. Kansas State last year in this offense with Colin Klein averaged over 200 yards a game. So it's going to be a battle of wills right there, and seeing what they do there. So Seth, what can you give us on schemes and ideas that you think Colin's got pulled up his sleeve for this weekend?
Well, I'm still a film junkie. That's a hobby now. It used to be the job, the 16 years as a coach, and I watch a lot of film instead of watching maybe Netflix like some people do at night. I'd pull up film and watch it. And of course, when Klein got hired, I had been a huge Klein fan for many years because I love people who know how to run the ball and don't do it necessarily just via I got the best running back in the nation, and that if you look at offenses that do that, Kansas State was always near the top. And so I actually have been studying him prior to him getting hired. So when he got hired, that was like Christmas to me, because I was like, there's just no way this guy will come here. He's a Kansas State alum. He's the next guy in line to get that job with Coach Kleiman left. And anyway, he's here. So let's break it down. He's old school but modern. It's a combination of both. When it comes to what he's trying to do in the run game is he's creating leverage, and there's all kinds of ways you can do that via formations, shifts, motions, personnel packages, you name it. If you ran you two defensive guys, when you ran a formation report, it would be 85 pages long, the kind where it's like, I don't know how you'd have to pick. And so what I'm expecting this will do is defenses will simplify. And that's what I've seen on film, is that you don't see a lot of exotic looks. They simplify and they teach their guys how to adjust to the leverage. And so that creates some benefit for your linemen. They're not seeing a ton of different things, different techniques. And so I expect to see that. You'll see pullers, you'll see fullbacks used, motion and the jet sweep and all the misdirection that creates. And then he tags reads and RPOs off of it to modernize it as well. So it's really cool. Number 13. So let's just talk about K-State from a talent perspective, kind of going back to that metric we used. If you pull up that talent metric, last year they were number 13 out of 14 teams in the Big 12 in talent rating on the recruiting websites. However, they were number 2 in points per game in the Big 12. So that tells you production and development have been a big deal at Kansas State. And I would say that those two things we've been recruiting and production and development the last few years at A&M.
Yeah. So going back, you were talking a second ago about all the different formations. My first year at Carthage, and Mark will attest to this, I had a buddy that was coaching at Spring Hill. And obviously, if you know anything about high school football, talent-wise, Carthage is here and Spring Hill's down here. God love those kids. It's just where God put them. And I remember I talked to the buddy the week we were going in to play him, and he was a defensive coach. And he texted me, he said, "How many stinking formations do y'all have?" And I said, "Dude, I've never broken it down. Like, I mean, to us, it's not really a formation. It's just a change in the verbiage to move one player here or there." And he said, "Dude, I'm going to tell you, we pulled it up and I forgot it was like 133 format. It was some crazy, ridiculous formation." And he said, "We've decided that we picked out your five most common, and that's what we're going to go with. And we're just going to wing it the rest of the time." And so, like you're saying with Colin Klein, when you can do that to a defensive coach, you've won before the ball's been kicked off, because you're talking about that leverage and you're talking about those things. You know, it makes it really difficult to be an attacking defense or attacking mindset when you're scared you're not even lined up with leverage before the ball's snapped.
I'll say that too. You know, from a defensive mindset, those are the people that challenged us the most when we were coaching defense. Those guys that gave us so many multiple looks. What you have to do is, I wouldn't say we did what Spring Hill did, because it's a little higher level, but some of the stuff that we wanted to do with our zone pressures or things like that, we had to make sure at the line that they were in one of those key formations that we could do it in. Try to get them in 3rd and long, knowing they're going to be like in a spread situation or something, and then we could do it. But if they gave us an exotic or one of those things that they didn't use very much, or some kind of motion that with a wing or something like that, we had to check base. And I think that's what those guys that do those formations, that's what they want. They know that if they get in a certain position that you're going to have to line up a certain way because of who you are, and then they got you, that they know where you're at, and your guys are going to have to be better than their guys at that point.
Yeah, and that 85 number I pulled out is not out of the blue. Full circle, I was one of the few years I coached defense. I was at Pittsburgh, and that was how many we printed out when we played Carthage that Sunday or that Saturday. It was an 85-page report, because our head coach wanted the formations taped up on the wall in the coach's office, and we went in there and told him, "Coach, there's 85 of them." He goes, "I don't care, tape them up there." So we had them taped and running down the floor, going. It was all over the place. And then he came in and got all mad because it was on the floor. We're like, "What do you want us to do, Coach?" Like, he's like, "Well, just pick the top," exactly like you said. Pick the top 20. What do you think we're going to see?
I remember playing Salina in the state championship game in 2008, and I was in charge of drawing all their formations on our 9 dry erase boards in our office. And normally I had them already gridded off, but I had to double grid them that week. And there were so many. And in the first half, they really got us in a bind with some overload offensive line stuff. And I went back when I got back after we won. I went back and said, why did we not line up well? Why did we have to adjust? And they had run that formation in 15 games. They had run it 3 times, but they figured us out. And that's what those guys can do.
Hey, so Mark, if you remember, me and you were coaching at Carthage when we played Seth that year. And that was the one that we threw an incomplete pass in the end zone. And it was at Pittsburgh, and instead of their clock guy letting the clock run out, he stopped it with 1 second. I'll never forget watching that head coach slam his headset and shatter it. And I'm thinking, good grief, that clock guy just got fired.
Yeah. No, he didn't, actually. I can tell you he didn't. And there had been other instances before that where we had gotten chewed out for yelling at him. And then one of our coaches had to apologize for yelling at him. And then that's what happened later on. So we were all in the coach's office going, But to get back to the offense, so 13th ranked talent out of 14, but second in points scored. And where they were number 1 in the Big 12 and number 2 in the country is red zone touchdown percentage at 78%. Yeah. And A&M last year was at 59%. And so I know there's many times we watch games where we would go, another field goal. Expect to see that tick up big time, because that's what Klein's run game and leverage does in the red zone, especially whenever the field gets compressed. He's creating leverage at the line of attack so you can still move the ball versus trying to just create leverage in the secondary where the space is now gone.
So are you saying that our red zone offense we won't just use the run, pass, field goal technique?
Well, it might be run, but it'll be with leverage and give those guys a chance. It won't be zone.
Yeah.
Inside zone, outside zone, throw a pass. Oh, we didn't get it, kick field goal.
Yeah.
Throw an end zone fade too.
Just throw the fade. Most high
fade always works.
Yeah.
High percentage pass.
Yeah. So no, when you see him getting in the red zone, I mean, that's when I don't know. I'm a nerd and I can pull up some of these stats, but I would bet the motions percentage even increases higher. It's the motion percentage he uses is in the high 30s. So you're talking about 1 out of every 3 plays. And I bet in the end zone it's even higher because when I've been watching when they get in the red zone, I notice the jet sweep. That's when it really pays off. They'll either use the motion to create conflict, or they'll use the jet sweep itself, where a defense is so plugged into the gaps trying to stop the inside run game, and you get a guy in space really easily, and so anyway, that's I guess my biggest gripe, and the gripe in the national narrative with Klein's offense was a lack of explosive plays at Kansas State. He was extremely efficient in the end zone, got a lot of first downs and all that, but didn't have a lot of explosive plays. But I would argue that sometimes explosive plays is more based on talent than it is scheme. And so I'm excited to see what he can do because we are not, A&M's talent rating is not 13th out of 14 in the SEC.
No, thank goodness.
He has increased it, even relative to competition. He has increased that. So there are some guys that can actually be explosive. One of the things I'm interested to see is that while he was at Kansas State, he used Will Howard, Adrian Martinez, and Avery Johnson, and all 3 of those guys are known as dual threat, run first type quarterbacks. A lot of scheme quarterback runs were used, where we know Connor's more of a throw first, run second guy. I mean, he's still athletic, but he's going to use his arm to beat you before he would his legs. And so I'm very interested to see how the offense changes. And I think there'll be more use of RPOs versus the quarterback run or read and run game, design run game. One of the other things I like about Klein is that if you study his 22 offense and his 23 offense, he had 2 very different running backs. 22, he had Deuce Vaughn, who was a guy who was really a really good vision, really good patience runner. And then you had DJ Gidden as in 2023, who was a very downhill, very much like Le'Veon Moss runner. And he's adjusted the schemes. I mean, from 22, they went a little more zone heavy. In 23, they went a little more gap scheme heavy with a puller and a little more power and things like that. So it's very interesting to see him change that based on skill, based on the skill set of his back, instead of just trying to plug and play the same guys into a system each time. So like I've mentioned before, motions and jet sweeps, leverage creates a nightmare for the DCs. And then, of course, you got the wild card in Terry Bussey. Very, very interested to see how they scheme up him some touches because that guy's, I've watched him play some high school football, and he's a special dude. And apparently it is translating from the little rumors I'm hearing from the practice reports and things like that with his move to offense. So very excited to see how that works too.
Well, Terry Bussey, which is just south of where Mark's sitting right now. What's exciting about that young man, I've done a little reading on him, is obviously he's a great athlete, but I didn't even know Tenaha or Timpson, as small as they are, had this. But that young man graduated already with an associate's degree before he stepped foot on A&M's campus. So
I didn't know that. Wow.
The man spent some time with some books too, so he's definitely a pretty special talent there. So we talked about the run game, and obviously Notre Dame's going to be good on the front with the Cross kid and all the other D linemen they got. But the scary part is that secondary with that safety with 7 picks and the All-American cornerback. So interested to see, we talked about the run game, what Colin Klein has in mind. I know he's a big tight end guy, and we've got some tight ends. So, and I think those guys are underutilized. I mean, Mark can speak to that. As a defensive coach at the high school level, you hardly saw tight ends. And we used it a lot at Carthage, mainly because they didn't know how to line up to it because it's so rare anymore. So if you want
nobody in high school football can even line up to the 2 tight end, 2 receiver thing anymore. It's amazing to me to watch Carthage get in 2 tight ends and 2 receivers and watch how people line up to them. That's why they expose people.
Well, talking about that, Mark, when we were at Carthage, anytime we felt like we didn't have a good grasp of what the defense was, to get them in a base defensive formation and get some confidence built, we would go with the double tight, double wide receiver, and we called it solo, and just run zone or something and just see where they're fitting up, and then we could adjust off of it. So. Yeah.
And he spends, I mean, Klein, I would say the number one personnel scheme you're going to see from him if you go back, is 12 personnel with a 2 tight end, 2 receivers, and 1 running back. And he uses those guys all over. One of them will get used in more of an H-back type role where he's going to be off the line and sometimes even in the backfield in a 3-point stance. That's what I mean by old school. They'll look like they're in the I formation with a gun, with a pistol snap, And so very interested. How they use the tight ends in the passing game is awesome too. I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff, but obviously it hinges on play action. And one of the things I've noticed is that he tends to make, there's always a built-in crossing route or a blitz beater of some sort. But it's not super complicated. It's not like watching Mike Leach's passing game at Tech, an air raid style attack. He usually gives, you can tell the quarterbacks have some type of blitz or man beater on one side of the field. They've got, a man or zone beater on one side of the field, a blitz beater somewhere. And then it's pretty simple. I mean, it keeps it simple. And he doesn't always release all 5 guys into routes either. He'll keep running back or maybe a tight end in and maybe only release 3. And that's something I think we could benefit doing some more for sure. As always, some unique screens. I've seen a ton of screen game used to all kinds of players, running backs, receivers, tight ends, RPOs as well, as I mentioned before. The one thing I have seen them struggle against last year was pure man coverage. There were some defenses that just said, we're going to man you up and beat us. And so some of those games, like in the Oklahoma State game, that's when they lost last year, where they struggled offensively a little bit. Oklahoma State just manned them up, and it required 2 things. I'd like to have seen more man beater, crossing route type, bunch sets and things, and they did that late. But the other thing is that requires a quarterback to throw your guy to the grass. And Will Howard is a great player. I mean, he's at Ohio State now, but nobody's saying he's got a big NFL future based on his arm talent. And so he struggled with that. He struggled with throwing a receiver open and threw some picks. And I think that's one thing I think Connor does well is throwing guys open. In the short time we saw him last year, he made some pretty great grass throws to guys that were covered, but gave them where it was only there they could make the play. Anyway, very excited to look into that.
Colin's going to have to improve on because he's not. I mean, maybe not this weekend, but he gets up in the SEC. They're going to man you up and figure out. When we go to Florida, I guarantee he's going to see some man coverage there. So hopefully he's got some things up his sleeve that he's ready to go with on that.
And I really think that's where supposedly, hiring Holman Wiggins, who has SEC coaching at receivers at Alabama all those years, him having his input into the passing game, I'm hoping will help with that. Because I know they're definitely not going to be the same offense as he had at Kansas State. That's what I'm super excited for game 1 to see, like, where are we different? And so I think Coach Wiggins will have have a lot of say there, or his influence will hopefully be seen there.
Well, and I think what we'd all agree on after the last 5-6 years, and what you explained earlier when you were talking about the 2 running backs and using more of a gap scheme with one as opposed to a zone scheme. At least we have a coach now that will try to adapt what he's calling to what he's got on the field, as opposed to sticking a square peg in a round hole and not wondering, why doesn't it fit? So, Mark, tell me what you think about the A&M defense versus that Notre Dame offense.
Well, number one, I don't think Notre Dame's offense is super explosive. You look at their schedule last year, and they're ranked high and all that, but you start looking at who they played. They played 3 tough games, and those games were like Duke and Louisville and Clemson, and they lost the Louisville and Clemson game. And
should have lost the Duke game if you go back.
The bottom line is this: if you can play good defense and you can score 23 points, you can beat Notre Dame. That's what it says on paper. And, so I like the matchup against this. The thing about Elko is, if you tried to pin him down and say, well, is he a 4-3 guy? Is he a 4-2-5 guy? You're really not sure at times because he is very multiple. That's what we did at Carthage, not in our first 3 championships, but once Darren Preston came along, we were a 4-3 Tampa 2 defense, and Darren was a 4-2-5 guy, and we meshed those 2 together, and it was a thing of beauty. And I think that's very similar to what Elko does. There's going to be times when at the snap of the ball, you're going to think there's 8 guys in the box, when really they have the ability to actually cover the pass out of that. But he's going to use that not only to confuse blocking schemes in the run, but to attack in passing situations where he's bringing – he may bring 2 guys off one edge and move his line to cover the run on the backside and the to keep the quarterback contained, and really, really put pressure on protections. I think that's the thing about Elko. And I think if we remember Elko when he was at A&M, I think people liked him because he attacks offenses. He does not just, Seth talks about formations and things like that, but he's going to be able to line up in situations where even when they're in complex formations, to still be able to bring the heat in situations, and not just in a pass protection type thing where they're throwing, but to actually use those blitzes as run blitzes to get run fits out of it. That's the key to blitzing, is to be sound. If they run the ball, you've got a smoke or something like that called, and they run the ball, that you're still very sound. And he does that really, really well with maybe the best of all time. And you hate to say that kind of stuff, but literally they got the hire right eventually, no matter how it went down. If you ever wanted to bring the wrecking crew mindset back to College Station, this is the guy. This is the guy you would have gone out and got, because he brings that, R.C. Slocum in his days, that's what he was known for, his ability to just put major pressure on the quarterbacks. And that was in a day and age where people ran the ball a lot. And
Mark, as a former coach, like, you could see how the former players that played under Elko, how they responded when he got hired. That tells you a lot. It's just like, if Mark goes Friday night to Carthage's game and you watch him go up in the bleachers, how many kids come up to him and talk to him and those type of things. That's the relationship Mark built with those kids long term. And so, I agree with you a lot. I think it's going to be exciting. I think you give him some grace because it is the first year. And, man, can you imagine in this day and age when he got hired, he was trying to handle keeping kids from transferring, finding other kids to transfer in, locking down the recruiting class and expanding on that recruiting class, and figuring out NIL. I just imagine.
Matt, and let's remember that Elko not only did all of that, but he was at a lot of A&M baseball games. He bought into the Aggie land culture, and the guy gets it. A&M is a different animal. When I was in college football, we were at Alabama, we were at LSU, we were at Oklahoma, Louisville, you name it. I've been to those places, and the culture in Aggie land is different. And he's bought into it. I'm really excited. But defensively, I look at this. He was at Duke last year, and he didn't have near the talent he has right now on defense. And I know the secondary and the linebacker situation can kind of be a question mark, but those guys are talented. And he held Notre Dame to 21 points at their place, and that was with Duke's defense. And I just feel like, I think they're going to hold them to field goals a lot of the time. I could see them coming out and doing some stuff and making this, Notre Dame offense look rough. Because, again, Notre Dame's offense is very young up front, and what he does is really challenge you. If they're going to run turn protection, he's going to challenge those guys. Who's the mic in this system with those guys rolling down? Who do we call the mic to? And when they call the mic, when the pressure comes, on the two-man side and they're bringing three off that edge, how does a young offensive line handle that? And I think that's where the advantage goes hard to A&M here. Elko's ability to attack protections, and that's the big key. When you're a young coach and you get into this business, you just draw up those blitzes against a bunch of zeros that aren't moving. And it looks really good. But when you get to that advanced stage, and I learned this from Chris Smith, who's the head coach at Birdville and was an assistant O-line coach at A&M, he taught me protections and what they do. And when you learn that, you learn how to attack that. And when you watch Elko's defense play, that is well taught by his defenses. They understand when they're turning the protection away from the mic and things like that, they know how to get numbers. And when you get numbers, you can put a good O-line in a bind, and not just a good O-line. Now you look at a young O-line that hasn't seen it at this level. And I think they're going to be ready with a lot of bullets in the gun, having gone through spring and now fall camp. They're going to have a lot of bullets in the gun that this young O-line hadn't seen, and that you add that and the Aggie land 12th man. If the 12th man will get loud, it's going to be a long, long day for that O-line. And I love it when it's a long day for the O-line. On the other,
what I love to hear from both of y'all is that sounds like we've got coaches. They're going to figure out what bullets they do have and how to adapt that to whatever scheme we need to do to win. And I think that's what we do at Rollo is we take a client, we figure out what that client needs, and we've got all the carriers to try to figure out what's going to be best for that client. We're not trying to, stick a square peg in a round hole, as I said earlier. And so I love that analogy. So, so score predictions for the week, I'm going to go first. I've got us winning in a defensive battle. I think both defenses are going to be great. I've looked at the weather forecast. It doesn't look like it's going to be helping the offense as much as it looks like it might be raining. So I've got a 17-4 A&M win defensive game. And my game MVP this week is going to be Le'Veon Moss. I've got him going for over 100 yards, and I think we're going to get to see a lot of what Seth was talking about with the different formations, the jet sweeps, utilizing that offensive line and those tight ends to ground and pound. So that's my prediction for this week. Mark?
Again, I hate predictions. Prediction scores just kind of dumb to me, but I'm going to go ahead and do it since that's what we do here. So I'm going 28-16 A&M. I feel like it'll be a good ball game, but I feel like A&M is going to be able to hold Notre Dame to field goals at times. I think A&M will score. I really feel like A&M, with listening to Seth, I feel like they could score 35, but I think they'll beat them by more than a touchdown. And I think Notre Dame will have the ball late. They'll be trying to, go down and score maybe a 2-point to tie it. I think Will Lee has a pick six, and he'll be my player of the game.
I like it. If we beat them by more than the score, I'm going to be drinking maroon Kool-Aid instead of this Dr. Pepper.
I firmly believe if I could predict one thing, the Aggie Kool-Aid will flow heavily after Saturday.
Go ahead, Seth. What's yours?
All right. I think that it's going to come down to that red zone percentage, which lost us a lot of close score games over the last few years. 27-23 A&M with a go-ahead touchdown late. I think that we hold them to 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals, and we score 3 touchdowns and kick 2 field goals. So it's an evenly matched game, but that one touchdown difference in the red zone is the difference in the whole thing. I had to pick a player of the game. My gut wants to go with Moss just because I am really excited to see what that guy can do in a downhill run game. Just to kind of talk about development for a second, that's where we've seen in 2022, we get the number 1 draft pick, or number 1 rated recruiting class of all time. Well, what really matters is how many players are you putting into the NFL? That's what matters. That's
what the
just
kids
on
care
paper.
about.
That's right. That's just potential though. And so Kansas State has never recruited in the same stratosphere as A&M, yet this year they put a tight end in the NFL. You can look him up. His name is Ben Sisson. He was a no rating on 24/7, and he was drafted 58th overall by the Washington Commanders, and it's looking like he's going to carve out a role early with them. DJ Gidden, their running back this past year that rushed for 1,300 yards, he's projected by most mocks to be a second-day pick next year, no rated by 24/7 when he was coming out of high school, and is now going to be a second-day pick, it looks like, and probably go for over 1,000 barring injury again. So that's what I'm excited about is a guy like Le'Veon Moss. I'm not sure how much development has been taking place over the last few years. So now you've got a roster loaded with talent and a staff that has done nothing but develop people at Duke and Kansas State. It's very excited to see what Moss can do from a developmental standpoint, but I'm going to have to go with Connor Wigman. I think he's going to come out and going to do what he does. I think there's going to be one big run by Connor that's out of the blue. I don't know if it's going to be a designed, a read game, or just a scramble, but I have a feeling he's going to rip off some 20 or 30 yarder, and then we're going to see him be the player of the game and win 27-23. So,
all right, guys. Well, this is the Tres Amigos. Let's hope we're all right and that we're celebrating late Saturday evening with some maroon Kool-Aid. And
I did forget one stat. I have to share it, man. Okay, so I saw that Notre Dame. I'm sorry, Notre Dame. I was texting with a buddy earlier. Notre Dame is 0-8 when they're playing in front of of 90,000 or more on the road since 2016. Okay, they are 0-8. However, Texas A&M is 1-8 when hosting game day.
Okay, so One of them's got to fold, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
Seth, I got to say this just because I love baseball. And the thing about baseball is they've got a stat about everything. So when you were coaching, Seth, what was your second sport when you were coaching?
Well, it was a lot of softball and baseball. Yeah.
Softball. There you go. There you go.
Did he say
Yeah.
softball? You softball guys. That's
Hey,
like,
look, it's a faster paced game. I enjoyed it, but
The stats matter still, you know.
there you go.
Anyway.
So
Look.
we're signing out. This is Trace Amigos. Appreciate y'all listening in. Give us a call if we can help you with any of your insurance needs. We got a guy in Gilmer, Seth. We got a guy in Carthage, Mark. And then I'm here in Hallsville. But thanks again for listening in, and Gig 'em Ags.
Gig 'em.
Gig 'em.